Somebody say action.
Action.
Not you. Anybody but you.
Action.
Actually, I prefer if somebody else did it. Not you or you.
James, why don't you say it?
No. James, say action.
Action.
So I just learned that 80% of the content on the social media platform, formerly known as Twitter, is created by just 10% of the people who use it. That means a tiny minority of individuals are creating what appears to be an overwhelming consensus around dozens of important topics. The same thing happens in the mainstream media every single day. And that's led millions of Americans to assume that their own opinions on a great many things are out of step with the opinions of the majority, when in fact, they're not. These assumptions are called collective illusions. And according to Todd Rose, they're the reason entire societies, including ours, wind up doing all sorts of things that we the people don't want to do. If he's right, then maybe, just maybe, America is not as divided as we think. I ran into Todd at a Stand Together event, and Todd and I started talking. We talked for about 40 minutes.
Yep.
And Brennan, the guy in the room, pulled me aside after you left, Todd, and he said, Mike, if there's a way to have that conversation again and share it with the world, I think we can save the Republic.
All right, well, that's a good high bar.
Yeah, no pressure. Okay, so back to Populace. The recent research, what illusions collectively are really at work in the workplace?
I think that we're known for at Populace, which is just incidental. It's stuff we needed is to get to the world we want, we need a drop-dead accurate understanding of what people really think. Right now in American society, there's an enormous amount of social pressure to say the right thing. Our brains have a conformity bias, right? All else equal, we prefer to be with our groups, not against our groups. And that's okay, that's good. But we are absolutely terrible at estimating what our groups think, because your brain thinks that the loudest voices repeated the most are the majority. On Twitter alone, 80% of all content is created by 10% of the users. That 10% isn't remotely representative of the rest of the public. If only 10% of people hold a view, but you think it's 80%, your brain is going to be like, that's the majority, and unless I'm willing to go against my group, I'm going to say nothing. And the result is these massive collective illusions. With respect to work, we're looking at what people's trade-off priorities are for the jobs they do. You would have imagined a lot of the typical stuff like a prestigious title, getting paid the most, working for a big name company, all these things, which historically have actually been markers of success and people have actually prioritized. Those things have plummeted, but what has risen is this pursuit of meaning and purpose at work.
The reason Dirty Jobs was such a tough sell is because nobody at the network believed that anybody would want to watch portrayals of what felt like drudgery in their mind's eye. The reason it's still in production 20 years later is that the cognitive dissonance has become simply unavoidable. That show, through humor, portrays hard work and confirms all of the difficulties and challenges you would associate with it, but it sprinkles over the top a patina of dignity, humor, a band of brothers mentality, and in many cases, a level of prestige, to your point, and prosperity that you wouldn't expect to find. That's why I'm so interested in your research.
In 2019, preparing for college was a top 10 priority for every demographic in the country. It has plummeted. The pandemic has completely reshaped this. It is now 47th out of 57 possible priorities for K-12.
Wow.
In its place is a commitment to preparing kids for careers and preparing them to do work that's meaningful and fulfilling. That's what we want now. Now, here's the problem when it comes to collective illusions. Preparing for college is 47th. It doesn't get much worse than that in terms of how actively we are deprioritizing this outcome. Do you know what we think it is? What we think most people would say? We think most people would say it is the third most important priority for education.
Top five, but it's
so
not.
There's no other outcome.
Amazing.
So here we are. We all want this thing. We are sick and tired of having this one-size-fits-all system funneling every kid to college on their dime just to have the privilege of being able to pay to be able to get a career that didn't require a college diploma in the first place.
I love it when the headlines catch up to my shows and make them relevant in ways that no one thought they were going to be. But I especially love it when the science catches up to my bullcrap claims and I can suddenly point to something and say, hey, look at that. I mean, I've been beating this drum for 15 years.
For all the perception of this deep polarization in our society, the truth is in almost every aspect of life that matters most, we have so much in common in private. It's unbelievable.
I mean, it's important, dude, because if people don't feel like they're alone in their convictions around the idea that shop class should be back in high schools and that our workforce can't be divided against itself, it's two sides of the same coin.
I care a lot about public education. What a great achievement in a society to mass educate people to such a level. But we are at risk of losing public support for this because it is no longer about doing better. It's about doing different. And if you don't recognize that fact, that we have to transform this institution and force it to deliver on the priorities and outcomes that the American public wants and realize that we are together on that, we can transform this thing tomorrow.
There were videos going around, and there still are. They're everywhere. People making videos of themselves at Twitter and Facebook and various Silicon Valley companies, and it's like a day in the life at my job. And it's just filled with things that make a lot of people just shake their head and go, "What? How is this even possible?" Right? Meditation booths, aromatherapy candles, bonsai gardens, they can walk around. Like, nothing that looks like work seems to be happening. And so I shared some links to these videos, and then next to them I posted some links to some recent dirty jobs, just to say, look, in a world where people are trying to figure out the definition of a good job, and we're looking for examples of what work is, okay, if you're going to look at that, at least look at this. Did I make it worse? Am I perpetuating a collective illusion? Or am I just trying to keep the conversation lively on the Facebook?
You're spot on, and here's why. So there's a massive collective illusion right now in the Workforce Priorities Index we found, which is all the stuff you named, all the goodies, all the free food and swag and meditation booths and stuff like this. All of those fall in the lowest priorities you could possibly have for the kind of work you want to do.
Thank God.
However, massive collective illusion. We think everybody cares about these things. We start to advocate for things that we don't really want. And unless you see some counter programming, right? Unless you see some alternatives. And I think this is why, for me, selfishly, the reason I wrote the book Collective Illusions is nobody knows about that phenomenon. So if you don't even know that it's possible that you can't trust your brain to tell you what most people think, why would you think you're wrong? Right? So I'm hoping that by people understanding that phenomenon, they can stop and say, you know what? There's no more point anymore to just blindly going along with what I think everybody thinks, because I'm probably wrong.
But what the research is saying is it only feels that way because everybody thinks that's what everybody is doing.
Yes.
And when you drill down, Gen Z doesn't want this shit. They don't want it. They want meaningful work. They want to move the needle. They want to make a difference.
This is a generation that was born and raised on our social technologies. The ability to amplify a vocal fringe without us understanding what that does to us and how our brains process that. They're the first to live through that completely. So it's not surprising that they are the most susceptible to these illusions right now. So that's the bad news, because if you don't do anything about illusions, they tend to become private opinion over time. The good news about collective illusions is they're disastrous when they're enforced, but they are fragile because they are lies. And history has shown us when we shatter them, you can unlock social change at a pace and scale that would be unimaginable otherwise. It's we the people that have succumbed to these illusions, and only we the people can shatter them. The best example of this ever is the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. We overthrew communism without a single person losing their life. And that was led by a poet and a playwright, Václav Havel, who had no military experience, was never a politician before, never formed a political party, and he had written this satire of communism called The Garden Party. And it was so subtle that the censors didn't even know they were being made fun of. And it was the Hamilton of its time. Everybody came, they laughed at all the right parts. They laughed at things they would not find funny if they really believed in communism. So he realized that the problem was not private agreement with communism, but a collective illusion. Even he doesn't realize what he's unleashed. He's interviewed in an international magazine, and he says, listen, I believe in the revolution, I'm in it for the long haul, but I don't think I'll live to see the end. 3 months later, he was the first democratically elected president of a free Czechoslovakia.
So the moral of the story is not that change can happen, but it can happen like that.
Like that.
If you walk a bad idea back, you really can almost find its progenitor. And if you walk a courageous truth forward, you can almost find the kid in the crowd in Hans Christian Andersen's story saying, hey, is it just me? Or is that emperor naked?
Yeah.
And once that happens, right? Whether it's Havel, whether it's a fictitious kid in a parade, you know, boy, it's extraordinary.
We can get somewhere unbelievably remarkable in America in a hurry. And all it takes, as simple as this sounds, is for everyone listening to speak up in their neighborhoods, with their families, in their churches, respectfully, humbly. You might not be right. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean you're right. But you owe it to your fellow citizens to respectfully give your opinion. If you do that, if you take that small act of courage, you will be part of something that history will look back on as ushering in an incredible new era of American prosperity, not just materially, but psychologically. That's what's available to us right now. It feels like the days are dark. They're not. They're not. And we have a role to play.